And welcome back to another Sportsnaut interview. And joining us is our own Crissy Froyd today. And we're talking week one college football takeaways. It was an eventful week one, some good games we saw there. And we're also going to look ahead to some of the matchups in week two. But Crissy, let's jump right into it right now. Lots to discuss. Let's first start with some top 10 teams. Which top 10 team did you walk away from this weekend most impressed with?
Georgia. I mean, it can't be anybody else other than Georgia. At first, I mean, looking at the first half of that game, you were looking at upset territory, number 1 versus number 14 Clemson. And Clemson had a couple things in its pocket, in my opinion, going into this one. There were some things that I thought we'd be impressed with. I thought they returned a lot of really good defensive starters on that side of the ball. But at the end of the day, like, it was Mike Bobo's halftime adjustments. The offense was not functioning the way that it needed to in the first half. But as soon as he made those adjustments, everything came together. And the funniest thing to me is there's always these people that jump the gun. All these people, Carson Beck is overrated. Carson Beck can't throw the ball past 10 yards. You don't have the Georgia offensive playbook in your hand. That's the one thing to look down on. And I mean, I covered Bo Nix pretty extensively and talked to the guys at Oregon that were surrounding him over there. And sometimes checking the ball down is just what the offensive coordinator is asking you to do. And sometimes it's what you need to do. Was it working for Georgia in that first half? Not necessarily. I mean, they walked in with 2 field goals to the locker room for halftime. So clearly it wasn't doing what it needed to do. But Carson Beck was clearly, looking back at that game, executing exactly what his offensive coordinator was asking him to do. And as soon as his offensive coordinator adjusted what he needed to adjust at his position, we saw Carson Beck's arm strength come through, all of Carson Beck's accuracy, all levels of the field come through. And Carson Beck looked like a first-round draft pick that not only will be a first-round draft pick, but could also be number 1 overall. And so I think we see Georgia's pure dominance shine through in that second half. And I think that that's going to be the tale of the rest of the season. This was supposed to be one of their biggest matchups. And I think that Georgia, based on this performance, is going to breeze right through everybody on schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what great programs with great coaches and coordinators and quarterbacks are able to do. They're able to make those adjustments that you mentioned, and you saw what they were able to do in the second half of that game. Now, while we're on the topic of Georgia and the Clemson game, I do want to jump over to Clemson and get to some of your thoughts on, what do you make of all that's being talked about with Dabo Swinney and his reluctancy to utilize the transfer portal? Clearly, this program is not what it was a few years ago. What's your take on what's being said recently here about Dabo Swinney?
Yeah, there was a time that Clemson was viewed the exact same way that Georgia was, believe it or not, for some of the people that are newer on the scene. But the thing about Dabo Swinney is that he seems to be a little bit stuck in his ways. No coach, in my opinion, on a large scale, and the numbers have shown this, have underutilized the transfer portal in quite the way that Dabo Swinney has, and he is paying the price. We look at the college football landscape and how well some of these teams have done. How many times do you see that it's a transfer from such and such university that is absolutely lighting it up on the field? We saw it with USC and LSU. I mean, I covered Woody Marks extensively at Mississippi State, and while I am an LSU alum, and it hurt a little bit to watch that happen the other night.
Yeah.
It was so good to see that guy get his opportunity, and that's happening everywhere. Dabo Swinney is not taking advantage of that, and that is part of his issue. The offense is stale. It's like old bread in the kitchen. You need to throw it out. That's what Dabo Swinney and his offensive coordinator need to do. They seem to have a reluctancy to throw it out. And until you throw it out and you make some changes, Cade Klubnik, not the best performance for him. Started off really good, actually. But I think that if you make some adjustments and give him some better coaching and a better offense to run in and some receivers that can actually execute, maybe this goes a little bit better. So I think Clemson has changes abound to make, and most of it starts on the offensive side of the ball, and Dabo Swinney being a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you 100% there on your assessment of Dabo Swinney and the direction of that program right now. On the flip side of the top 10 team that most impressed you, is there a top 10 team or maybe even a former top 10 team at this point, because we did have the new AP poll come down today, that you have concerns with now?
LSU was not in the top 10, but it was
Mhm.
close. That's the team that I have the most concerns with right now. I think that LSU executed pretty well. I think that Garrett Nussmeier put on a fantastic performance in his own right, but that the rest of the team didn't really execute the way that they needed to. So I'm really curious to watch Brian Kelly in this new era. I mean, the continuance of a new era, rather. I think he has a lot of the pieces that he wants. I think there's a lot of newer guys at some key positions like center. And you want to watch this team continue to grow. But the way that they were unable to finish out that game as a ranked opponent going up against an unranked opponent kind of gives some reason for concern of LSU is a good football team. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
But is LSU a good football team against the other ranked teams and unranked teams like USC?
Yeah. Positive though from that game for LSU, excellent quarterback play in that game. So that's something that they can, look forward to in the coming games here as something they can build on. Um, I want to get into some of the individual performances that we saw from week one. There was a lot of really good individual performances from the week. I thought the one that stood out the most to me, and I want to get some of your thoughts on that, was Cam Ward, the transfer into Miami. He was really, really good in the game, and he has college football fans excited again about the possibility of Miami being back. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that Miami entered this season as a dark horse team, as we kind of talked about, to make it into the college football playoff. I thought Cam Ward did some really good things. They turned on the Jets pretty immediately. This is a guy that's seen the field for a number of different teams, a little bit of a journeyman who kind of just needs to take the spotlight and hold on to it for a whole year. I thought that he did a pretty good job in several different aspects of quarterbacking, but I also saw some of that same inconsistency, and I want to see him perform at as high of a level as everyone else seems to think he has performed at against better competition. Because Florida, unfortunately for Florida fans, I think that there was some excitement, some optimism going into this one, but then they quickly realized like this is still the same Florida team. I do not expect Billy Napier to come back next year, and just a lot of missed opportunities on both sides of the ball. So we see a lot of big standout quarterback performances across the board, just looking at the team as a whole against some of these lesser teams. And I'm going to go ahead and call Florida a lesser team because I do believe Florida
Yeah.
is still a lesser team this year. And so we want to see how these guys continue to carry these performances going into the coming weeks, because I think week one, week two, you have a lot of guys who are a flash in the pan, and they hit the rubber meets the road and they can't do it anymore. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to watch how Cam Ward can handle higher level competition and defenses.
Great point there, and I would agree with you. Florida definitely not definitely a lesser team, and along with Clemson, two programs that are just trending in the wrong direction right now. Once uh, programs that were very storied, has a lot of tradition of winning, but just not going in the right direction right now. Those two programs. How about the defense for USC? I mean, they had a complete overhaul, new coordinator, new scheme. I know you don't want to talk about the LSU game a whole lot, being an alum there, but I thought that the USC defense came up with a number of crucial stops there down the stretch of the game that really helped them win this game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is I have a slight amount of bias toward LSU, but at the same time, I have genuine respect for teams that are able to rally against LSU in the way that USC was able to. Yeah, I think they came up with some really big stops, and it comes down to the last play of the game. Garrett Nussmeier's last play of the game was the classic inexperienced quarterback that didn't shine through the entire game. I thought he was very calm, very collected, did a good job, but it was the interception at the end, put the icing on the cake. And on top of that, like you said before, USC's defense coming up with several important stops, and that's why this game came down to the wire. I think it was two very good offenses, two pretty good defenses going up against each other. And I think that USC is a team that maybe we should start talking about being underrated coming into this season. I thought Miller Moss, the quarterback, was a little bit of a wild card going into this one because he doesn't have a lot of tape. I mean, you can put Miller Moss and Connor Weigman almost into the same type of category. Connor Weigman failed, thought he had a horrible showing of this first time. Miller Moss, same kind of thing. Like, do we know what we're getting out of this? And he hadn't been talked about as much as Connor Weigman had been talked about. And I thought that he really, really performed. And to do that against a team that was as highly ranked as LSU gives us a lot of optimism. So I think USC is a team to really watch out for in a way that maybe people didn't give the appropriate amount of respect to in the beginning of this.
Yeah, well, they're getting respect now. They made the biggest jump in this week's poll. They jumped 10 spots up to 13 after that win over LSU. Let's look ahead now to some of the games here in week 2, starting with what looks like to be the game of the week, at least on paper. You have number 3 Texas travels to the Big House to take on number 10 Michigan. Now, Michigan's going to have to play much better than it did against Fresno State to walk away with this one, walk away from this one with a win. But, how do you see this one playing out with Texas?
Yeah, Fresno State has a tendency to be a bit of a bulldog. I mean, that's their mascot, but Fresno
No pun.
State, a tendency to kind of cause issues for teams because they're a little bit underrated. Jay Kaner is someone who I'm close with, and he's talked about that at length a few times. So I think that Michigan comes in as one of the best teams in the nation because, hello, they won the national championship last year. That's just going to happen. But at the same time, this is a team that's going through so much of a state of transition. Harbaugh is not there anymore. The quarterback's son, JJ McCarthy, is not there anymore. I mean, you have a lot of big changes. It's not quite the exact same team. And Fresno State kind of gave them hell, but I think they were able to kind of move past it a little bit. But Texas, to me, is so much of a bigger animal than Fresno State is. So watching how Michigan's able to perform with so many changes is going to be a really big thing. And to be honest with you, I think Texas's dominance, it was Colorado State. Colorado State needed to make a lot of changes during that game. So it's kind of a cupcake, if you will, for a team that's as strong as Texas is in the first week. But I think that what Texas showed versus what Michigan showed in that first week, I think that Texas rolls over Michigan if Michigan's not able to make the proper adjustments.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that as well. Now, another game that at least I'm personally a little bit interested in when I look at the matchup, there is some star power in the game. It's 2 unranked teams, actually. Colorado, who survived a scare in week 1, versus Nebraska, who debuted their prized quarterback recruit there, Dylan Raiola. Again, unranked teams may not be getting a lot of talk in the national spotlight, but if you look at some of the players on this team, this could make out for an interesting matchup. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Dylan Raiola is someone who's going to continue getting our attention. He's one of the sneakier players this season. Thought he did a lot of good things in week 1, and so this is going to be a quarterback. We talk about dark horses. There's a lot of dark horses that we laid out in the midst of a season in which the quarterback class is not viewed nearly as highly as it has been in past years, including last year. But I feel like one of those we didn't talk about that has presented himself is Dylan Raiola. So that is going to continue to be a trend. But then we just kind of look to the other side and what they're able to do. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to watch the Colorado. I mean, Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, and Travis Hunter are 2 of the only truly elite prospects they have on that team. And so how they're able to fix the rest and the supporting cast and everything, like if you're an elite team in the nation, North Dakota State should not be scaring you like that. And that's just kind of my view on it. So it's going to be the way that they collect. It's a team that I view as having a few really, really good, like first round draft pick types, but unlike a Georgia, unlike a different team, you don't have the depth or the other players that are above average to help boost you up. You have a bunch of severe problems within it.
Yeah, we'll see if Coach Prime can get those guys ready to go here, because I think this is going to be a tough matchup for them. But Crissy, Froyd, everybody, we thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to chatting with you again. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.